Hey everybody, welcome to the World Cup update. This week we're going to talk about the round of 32. Are we seeing big pricing jumps for hoteliers now that we're in the knockout stage, or is it more business as usual? Let's get into it and answer that question. All right, so can you believe it? The group stage is already over and we're into the knockout round. Today is Wednesday, July 1st. That's when I'm recording this, and we're about midway through the round of 32 games. So now that we're in the knockout stage, are we seeing crazy pricing jumps, or are hoteliers still dropping rates? You'll remember that the round of 32 kicked off with that Canada game in Los Angeles. So this was Canada versus South Africa. This game did not really see any noticeable pricing growth in the final days leading up to it. In fact, hoteliers dropped about 11% in the final days leading up to that game. And that's probably just because Los Angeles is such a massive market that even though we had a really good feeder country in Canada, that still wasn't enough to move the needle for Los Angeles hotel pricing. The next day, we had some really crazy matches. So in Houston, we had Brazil versus Japan. That was the first one of the day. And for Houston, pricing didn't really increase in the final days leading up to that game. In fact, rates kind of continued their slide that they had been on for the past 30 days. This was a very big surprise to me just because Brazil travels so well, and Houston is a really good value market for both Japanese travelers and Brazilian travelers. So to see no pricing increases was a little bit of a surprise, but there you have it in the data. And let's next talk about Boston. So this was the huge upset where Paraguay beat Germany on penalties. Now for this game, it's the same story where even though you have this monster team with Germany that travels really well, or their fan base travels well, we didn't see any appreciable pricing growth in the city of Boston. Now, this may be due to the fact that the game is played in Foxborough. It's a little bit far away, but still didn't move the needle here as well. Now, let's talk about the one exception here in the data set that we're going to talk about, and that is Monterrey. So in Monterrey, this was another huge upset. This was Morocco versus Netherlands, where, of course, Morocco won on penalties. And the pricing growth here in Monterrey actually is positive. Now, we ended up seeing 16% pricing growth in those final 7 days leading up to arrival for Monterrey. And here's why I think that happened. There's two reasons. First, and I think this is not necessarily the biggest factor, but Monterrey is a little bit on the smaller side versus some of the other host cities. And when I say on the smaller side, I'm of course talking about hotel supply. It's nowhere near as big as a Los Angeles or New York, obviously. So I think that is naturally kind of causing some of this compression here in this market. And then the second, and I think bigger factor, is the fact that the Netherlands travels really well as a fan base. And of course, think back to their group stage games. The Netherlands played in Dallas and they played in Houston, and that's not too far away from Monterrey. So they had a big, massive built-in fan base that was probably already hanging around in Texas, and all they had to do was make it down to Monterrey, which is, of course, not that far from Texas. So that's why I think we see this appreciable pricing growth here in Monterrey. Okay, and because Monterrey is the one exception here out of all the round of 32 games that we're looking at, let's do a little bit of a deep dive and see if there's anything else that we can learn about Monterrey. I want to pull in the rate evolution by star level. So what we're looking at here is, of all the hotels that we're tracking in Monterrey, we've got the pricing for 3-star and under, 4-star hotels, and then 5-star hotels. So let's see where that growth was actually coming from. And you can see this, this is the pricing evolution curve. So as we get closer and closer to arrival, then we see this jump. And that jump in pricing was primarily happening at the 4-star and to a lesser extent, the 3-star and under level. 5-star hotels in Monterrey, of which there are some 5-star hotels, ended up dropping actually. So here we're looking at a 10-day before arrival, and you can see that the 5-star hotels drop from $426 down to an average of $404. The 4-star hotels have this really massive jump from $247 up to $344. So that's a jump of almost $100 in forward-looking in pricing, which is massive. And then the 3-star hotels, a lot more modest of a gain, but it's still, it's still a gain nonetheless. So 3-star and less. So 3-star and under hotels went from $224 average forward-looking price to $241. So, still pretty noticeable in the data set. So I think that is very interesting. This looks like this was not necessarily driven by 5-star luxury. It looks like maybe more so the 4-star and then 3-star and under hotels were able to push rate significantly more. Then let's look at the games that happened yesterday. So in Dallas, we had Norway that beat Ivory Coast. No noticeable pricing growth there. In fact, hotel rates dropped an additional 8% as we got close to that game. Then we see Mexico City. This one only dropped 1%, but you've got to keep in mind that Mexico, there's so much built-in demand there already. So I think what we're seeing is a stadium filled with people from Mexico and Mexico City. So I think that's why we're not necessarily seeing any noticeable pricing growth there. And then yesterday, France's game versus Sweden, where you've got a monster team with France that did see good pricing growth when they played in the group stage for New York City, but we did not see that same spike in pricing here for this particular game. All right, so that's it for this week's World Cup update. I'm very curious to see what is going to happen in the later stages. I think when we do get to the semifinals and the finals of the World Cup, we will see a lot of very last-minute pricing increases from hoteliers, but we're only going to know once we get there. So stay tuned. I will have a few more of these World Cup updates before it's all said and done, but thanks for watching this time around. Appreciate it.